Good afternoon, everybody. I am very excited for this session with you this afternoon. This is going to be on articulation, and the people that you see on the screen in the front of the room are members of the International Clarinet Association Pedagogy Committee. We're going to start by introducing ourselves, letting you know where we are from. Obviously, I'm Dr. Schuler. I am the clarinet professor here at Eastern New Mexico University. Although I don't see Dr. Mackey here now, and I think, oh, there he is. Do you want to just go ahead and introduce yourself?
Excellent. Thank you all very much for being here. It's great to see part of it. My name is Dr. Corey Mackey. I'm the clarinet professor at TCU in Fort Worth, Texas. And whenever I talk to any of my students about articulation, I like to start off with this study where there's essentially three parts to every note. We have the starting of each note, the envelope of the sound, so the meat and potatoes of the note, and then that final how we release the note. And essentially what they did is they, recorded all these different instruments playing the same note. They cut off the start of the note, they cut off the back of the note, and they just had the envelope of the sound. It's actually really hard to tell what instrument is playing because the start of how we start and end each note is so characteristic to each of our respective instruments. If you want to hear like a cartoonish version of this, listen to any MIDI keyboard instrument try to imitate a clarinet, and they've done a very big example of what we all try not to do, and it hurts your feelings if you listen to it, but you kind of get the idea. And so what I like to tell students is that we have to focus kind of on those three different parts of how you start each note, your tone throughout the note, and then also how do you end the note? Do we have a stopped release? Do we have an ah release? Look at all those beautiful faces. Excellent. So we have to think about kind of all three different parts of the note. And so having that as a kind of a frame of reference as we're moving forward, I think is really helpful to kind of get the idea when it comes to articulation. And I think I'll send it back to you.
All right, so this morning, or I guess this afternoon, I'm going to talk about the role of air in articulation. And I'm going to start out with a couple of quotes by people who are far smarter than what I am. So think about what this means in terms of how do we use air when we articulate. How many people have heard the name Arnold Jacobs before? Who's Arnold Jacobs? Tuba. What was his ensemble? What was the big group he played with that we remember him for? Chicago Symphony Orchestra. Absolutely correct. So in his teaching, there is a book written about him by Brian Frederickson, and the quote from that book is, "Next to problems with respiration or breathing, the most common problems with which students came to Jacobs are those concerning the tongue. The tongue is an unruly organ and has nothing to do with vibration, but can easily get into the airstream and negatively affect the tone's production." So again, as we're talking about articulation today, we need to keep in the back of our brains, what am I doing with my air? Because that's going to impact the sound. The next quote is from David Etheridge, who is a professor of clarinet at the University of Oklahoma. And his quote is, if you can visualize with me, "Imagine a bowling ball rolling down the lane and striking the pins. You want to keep that same steady momentum and steady airflow when slurring or tonguing." So as we're going through today, think about that bowling alley, think about the bowling ball of your air constantly moving down the lane. The last quote is from Yixi Chen and Tiffany Valvo from their online digital clarinet academy. And that is, "In order to successfully articulate, the air and the tongue have to remain cooperative but independent." So again, a lot of times when we start talking about digesting articulation, what is the tongue doing? We sometimes forget about the importance and the role of air. So to warm us up for that this afternoon, we're going to do a couple of pretty basic breathing exercises. I'm sure you have done these before. However, we're going to do them in the landscape of thinking about, but what is my tongue doing? So if you have an instrument, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and set it on the table in front of you very carefully for a second. We're going to take some inhalations for 4 counts. We're going to do this with that, pick one arm and just, and then we're going to exhale for 4. We've all done this before, right? However, this time as you're inhaling, now I want you to think about the state of the tongue. Where is the tongue located in your mouth? What is the shape of the tongue? Is it relaxed? Is it tense? And think about on the sides of your tongue, can you feel anything? Do you feel anything with the tip of the tongue? So think about all those things with your tongue as you're breathing. Let's go ahead and take 4 counts in, thinking about the tongue. Inhale. And exhale. Hopefully, does the tongue feel nice and relaxed at the moment? Good. A lot of times when we get into articulation work, there's this tendency to tense everything up, and we want to eliminate that. To prove a point, we're going to do that incorrectly once. I do want you to tense up the tongue muscle as you breathe. And we're going to think about how that feels. So where is the tongue? What's going on? What's the state of the tongue? Tense it up, and we're going to do that same inhalation in. Ready? Tense tongue. And exhale. As you tense that tongue, did anybody feel that like your chest or your torso or maybe your neck, everything kind of tensed along with it? I see some head nods. So we're going to keep all of those muscles relaxed because when we're doing our articulation work, we don't want things to tense. So let's try that proper breath one more time and think about where's my tongue, what's it doing? Here's your inhalation. Think about the tongue. Ready for in. And exhale. So that can help us be cognizant or more aware of what the tongue is doing. The next exercise I'm going to lead us through, this is from Larry Guy. This is from his Articulation Development for Clarinetists. And again, we're just going to confirm that we're moving our air the right way before we start this articulation work. What he asks us to do is you're going to hold a hand up like this, take a deep inhalation, and you should hear what I call a Hoover vacuum sound. It should be a very deep sound as you breathe. Go ahead and try it. And you should be beautiful. I love those sounds. Beautiful. Right. And if we had tension, instead of that deep breath sound, you're going to get something that sounds like this. It's more of like a H-E-E sound. Try that. That's bad air. We don't necessarily want that. Yeah, that's a very tense breath. We're not really engaging fully with the lungs. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to breathe in correctly, and then I want you to exhale that air to your hand. And while you're doing it, think about where is my tongue, because we need that information for the things that will come next. So we're going to try our inhalation and then blow into the hand. Think about your tongue. Ready? Exhale. And start to feel what's going on with the tongue. Be mindful of where that tongue position is. The last thing that I want to leave us with today, and I've not tried this on saxophone, but I'm pretty sure that this is going to work on saxophone as well if you take off your neck joint. Clarinetists, go ahead and take off barrel with mouthpiece attached. One of the difficult things about articulation is it's kind of a closed system. You can't really see inside unless you have the X-ray machine. So this can be really great for visual learners. How many future music educators possibly do we have in this room? Most of the room, all right? So when you're working with students, sometimes you have somebody who really likes to see things, and you're saying, well, the reed is vibrating, and they're like, I don't understand this. They can't see it because it's in their mouth. What we can do to just see, okay, what's vibrating and where are we going to need to put that tongue is instead of blowing the air that way, we're actually going to pull the air through. And if you watch, and if you don't have a clarinet or saxophone, watch someone beside you, you can see what part of the tip of the reed is vibrating. So that can give you some good feedback that you'll need for tongue placement. So it's going to be really high pitched, yeah. It's going to be not great sound. But make it and watch the reed. Go for it. Loudly. So if you watch, again, that gives you good feedback on what portion of the reed is vibrating. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pass this over to Dr. Branch.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Jennifer Branch. I teach at Montclair State University. I primarily see a lot of music ed majors. And these are trumpet players and violinists, and I'm teaching them the ins and outs of all things clarinet and saxophone. So I'm glad to be with you, and it's great to see such a full room. I'm going to piggyback on a lot of the similar stuff that Pam was just talking about. A lot of times when, nothing like playing a musical instrument to really learn about multitasking. So we're always thinking about that complicated key signature, that finger pattern, those leaps, when we articulate, when we don't, and that our priority becomes all of that instead of where we really want it to be, first and foremost, primarily, the airstream. And nothing like articulating for that to really ring true. So it's a lot of times we're setting out, I really want to work on my tonguing, and it becomes all about the tongue, when where we really want that first priority to be, the airstream, may disappear. So there's a lot of great analogies out there. One of my favorite is you're holding the garden hose and it's connected to your house and you have that spigot on maximum. And so that airstream is going, or that water stream is going parallel to the ground. What happens if I take my hand 2 feet away and I slice the water? Is what's coming out of the hose changed? No, it is not. So what's coming from the house still remains on maximum mode, as we want to be thinking about our air just the same. So it is instead our tongue that interrupts the airflow that's going constantly behind. So conceptually, a lot of this may make a lot of great sense, but sometimes bringing this home to something we can feel more tangible becomes more difficult. So what I recommend to my students, if they're articulating something and I see their chest is changing because their airstream is affected, I'll say, all right, let's put the clarinet down. And can you sigh? So when we sigh, I don't know about you, but I don't know anybody who goes, ah. Nobody does that. When we sigh, instead, it's this very complete feeling in our chest. So you can experience that if you want now. And then on the exhale of a sigh, what does that feel like? Similarly, I don't know anybody who goes, nobody does that. So instead, when we exhale, it's this very complete feeling, uninhibited, unrestricted in our chest feeling. So after you've done that, then without the clarinet, I recommend that you, on the syllable to several times, and if inside your chest, it resembles that same feeling of exhale as when we're sighing, that's great. That's step one. Step two is a really important step. So you now need it on your clarinet, but you're not going to create a sound. Instead, it's just the airstream. And so a lot of people are like, well, how do I not create a sound on my instrument with blowing massive quantities of air? So it's really just the lips that close around. There's no bite in jaw. There's no grab of teeth. So I love this step, the second step, because we can really hear, what is the air doing? Is the air constant? Is the air massive? And further than that, we can also feel or hear, what is the tongue doing? So what we don't want, we can hear if the tongue is low on the reed with that step. We can also hear, sometimes there's like a double strike thing going on, which you can really hear this way as well. And then the third step would be applying this onto the instrument with a single pitch. So I recommend a first, a fifth, a first, a fifth, a first, a fifth up the register of the instrument, knowing that the lower part of the instrument is more forgiving. And as we go into altissimo, that's where a lot of other factors, which I know other people today are going to speak about, such as is there extra motion? What is our voicing like? So in summary, I guess I would say, if when we're tonguing and we set out to tongue, we're working hard, perhaps you want to ask yourself, is the priority my air or my tongue? And it's when it's the air that it becomes a little bit easier. When you've heard great people who can articulate super fast, a lot of times it actually sounds easier because the air is a priority. So I'll pass the baton.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ji-hyun Woo. I teach at the Sejong University and Bogon University from Korea. It's so nice to meet you this way from like the other part of the world. It's actually like 6 o'clock in the morning. So it's very special for me to be in this place with you about this articulation tonguing class. I just like to mention about the tongue fundamentals. And I prepared on handouts. I don't know if you have one with you, but I just like to go through it, and just like it's everything maybe you might know already, but I just would like to touch some things so that it will be easier for you to understand the fundamentals again. First, I mentioned about the tongue positioning. It's like all about the embouchure before we tongue, and the embouchure, as you know, we for the tongue we always prefer the e sound, e. So like the tongue will be like a high arched at the back of the mouth, and it will be better for the control and articulation, and it's also like helps in creating a focused airstream for producing a clear notes. And then it's the embouchure to just for a reminder. So with the E and the here we go O. So it's like sound. And so we cover the mouthpiece with your lips. And then you tongue like yeah. So that's one thing I would like to touch for the fundamentals. And then the tongue technique is like you lightly touch the tip of the tongue. So it's like where your tongue and where the taste buds are with the tips, and your tongue like just below the tip of your reed here. And it depends on people, and for saxophonists, maybe you tongue here, and because the angle of the mouthpiece, you go more further back from the body. So and for a clarinetist, it's more like into the body. So it depends on how your mouth is shaped, and also how your tongue size or how your tongue moves. So it's not like one direction like here, but I just made a comment about the most common way people tongue. So it's with your tongue, tip of your tongue touches the reed here, and maybe it can be here, it can be there. All exceptions are acceptable. And the next one is release and airflow. For other instruments, it's not always the same. For us, we have to put the mouthpiece and the reed at the same time in our mouth. So how it works, like for instance, for brass instruments, you have the mouthpiece up here, like attached to your mouth, so it's more attacking. But for us, we use our reeds, so the reeds vibrates and it makes the sound. So what our tongue does is it stops the vibration of the reed. So when we release it, then the tongue happens, like the tonguing, articulation happens at that time. It's already what you know, probably, but just our tonguing is about like releasing. So I just wanted to mention about that. So when we release the tongue, the airflow and the tonguing happens. And when we tongue again, when we cut the reed, then the airflow interrupts, and so it stops the tone. The next thing is flexibility and speed. To achieve flexibility and speed in tonguing requires practice and coordination. And after this one, and all these great pedagogies will let you know how to do it. So I'll pass the batons to them, and hope everybody will get to where we want to go, like with comfortable tonguing with speed and flexibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Jihyun. I'm Julianne Kirk-Doyle. I teach at the Crane School of Music at SUNY Potsdam. And I'm going to outline a few things that maybe we see in students or we've personally had problems with. When I was a young, like sophomore, junior in high school, I was an anchor tonguer. And that's where there's varieties of anchor tonguing. But for me, I held my tip of my tongue on my lower teeth, and then the middle of my tongue was touching the reed. So Jihyun kind of mentioned, some other folks had mentioned that. So I had kind of that thuddy sound going on. And so I had a wonderful teacher who was like, nope, you got to get your tip up to the tip. And in a couple of weeks, I had it sorted out because I was like, no, I don't want to do this wrong. Some other issues I've seen when students come into college is they tongue the roof of their mouth with the tip of their tongue. So you get kind of this funky, clicky sound as they're articulating, or their tongue doesn't touch anything and they're using their air here. And so you'll see hoo, hoo, hoo going on in the neck, and you'll see all sorts of puffing and weird stuff. And we want to watch out for all of these things. And so you've heard a lot about the tongue needs to be in contact with the reed. And this is a really important concept. I will share a reverse of that. And my husband, who's a saxophonist, when he started playing, he started as a clarinetist. And his teacher said, to articulate, you must put your tongue on the reed. So he took him at his word, little sixth grader. He put his tongue on the reed like this, and it never came off. So he got to college, and he spent several semesters just trying to get the tongue to come off the reed. He had this really funky like subtone thing going on. So those are some things you could encounter with your students if you're going to be a teacher, and just always kind of going back and reevaluating in yourself what's going to happen. So the idea of getting those two taste buds at the front of the tongue to the tip of the reed, and I actually made up a little reed. I don't know if you all can see this at all. It may not be very clear, but I've made some little marks at the tip. And then the other thing I like to show students is how much mouthpiece needs to go in our mouth for where the reed vibrates, because the reed vibrates like a diving board. And so you can see where the business card kind of goes down, that much reed, your lower lip needs to be down here so that you get the maximum amount of vibration for the sound. And then the tip of your tongue is way up there at the top of the reed. So, yeah. And if somebody, I think I'm going to pass the baton to Josh now to talk a little bit about tip to tip articulation.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. My name is Josh Gardner. I teach clarinet at Arizona State University. And yeah, so as Julianne was talking about, there's a lot of things you might encounter in the classroom. And she mentioned something that I was guilty of doing. I was a hooer. I hooed. That was my articulation. Hoo, hoo, hoo. I had no idea you were supposed to touch the reed because no one told me that I was supposed to touch the reed. And I mean, the thing's vibrating. Why would I want to touch it? It's, it's a sharp edge. It's moving. I don't want to do that. And this was like in middle school, and we had like a seating test or something. I don't know. I was playing for my teacher, and they asked, "Are you articulating?" I'm like, "Well, yeah." And it's like, "Well, are you touching the reed?" And I very confidently said, "No. Why would I do that?" I had no idea. And I think from a teaching perspective, it was actually really good to go through the process of learning how to do this from scratch, having done it about as wrong as you could do it, meaning not at all. I don't know what's worse. I mean, I think correcting anchor tonguing is also incredibly challenging. But in this process, I am a big proponent of tip to tip articulation. The tip of the reed touched by the tip of the tongue. And one of the big challenges with that is that we can't see it when it's happening. We don't know what exactly is happening in the mouth because it's closed, hopefully. So that presents a lot of really significant challenges to us in the classroom and to ourselves, because not only can we not see it when we're practicing, but we also, our perception of what's happening is not great because we don't learn any of the tongue's functions in daily life. We don't learn from someone telling us how to do it. We learn it from a lot of trial and error and a lot of feedback that we get, especially when learning a language. So consequently, we're just really bad at determining what our tongues are doing. So to get a better idea of what this tip to tip means, we have to identify what the tip of the tongue is. So let's do that. Take your finger, stick your tongue out, and just scratch the tip of your tongue with your fingernail. chances are you probably got pretty close. I mean, ideally we'd be doing this in like front of a mirror, so we're not like that's not the tip of the tongue. Okay, now do it again. Good. Now, if you've got an instrument nearby, you can do this with either mouthpiece barrel, mouthpiece neck, or the whole instrument, doesn't really matter. Stick your tongue out and find the edge of the reed with that same part of the tongue that you just scratched with your fingernail. Now, hopefully, that's a familiar sensation, meaning that you might be touching that part of the reed with that part of the tongue. Okay, now, we're taking the horn away. Do it again. Now, leave it there, leave it there. And without taking your tongue off the reed, put the mouthpiece in your mouth. But leave your tongue on the reed. And form an embouchure. And you see, you can feel how your tongue has to shift back a little bit in order to reach that spot. Okay, shake it out. Let's do it again. It's all about repetition, correct repetition. That's what we're after. So stick the tongue out. Find the edge of the reed. And you can like scratch the tip of your tongue with the edge of the reed too. It's a very distinct feeling. Now, once you get the horn in your mouth, just say ta 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 a few times, touching that same spot of the reed with the tip of the tongue. Don't need to play. Okay, we've done that. Now take it out. We're going to do it all over again. Remember, correct repetition. Stick the tongue out. In. Now play an open G, or whatever note of choice. That's great. So ideally, we'll be using the tip of the tongue, and if it feels like it shifted a little bit, we do this over and over and over again. It's all about repetition and forming this habit. It's target practice, really. And unfortunately, since we're not really good at determining what our tongues are doing, we have to do it a lot and be very, very aware of what it feels like so that we don't slip into bad habits. I have a technique that I use that I make every single one of my students do, and I call it interruptions. And it's the idea is that we learn how to touch the edge of the reed without actually stopping the sound. And I'll demonstrate it for you. I gotta get my metronome on. So we play. I always have students start on a low C because it's a nice, easy note. And after we've done this exercise, identifying where the edge of the reed is and the tip of the tongue, we'll switch over to this exercise to put it into practice. And the idea is that we touch the edge of the reed with the tip of the tongue lightly enough and with air. I'm so glad you've heard from numerous people now already about the importance of air. This exercise does not work if your air is stopping or if your air doesn't have enough oomph behind it. It's got to have plenty of power. So we play a low C and we put the tip of the tongue on the tip of the reed without stopping the sound. And it sounds like this. It's an interruption. It's not stopping the sound. We're just like dampening the reed a little bit. Now, you can do that and not touch the edge of the reed. And it sounds like this. Oh, if I can make myself do this, this is hard. I hear that sound a lot. In this case, I'm touching the reed down here. And there are a few things that we notice. One, and this is the big one, the pitch goes down. If we touch the edge of the reed, pitch goes up. That's our litmus test for determining if we're touching the edge of the reed or not. If we touch below the edge of the reed, the pitch goes down. If we touch the edge of the reed, the pitch goes up. So I have students start with the metronome at 80. and feel free to try this on your own as well. We'll start with 2 beats with the tongue not on the reed, and then 2 beats with the tongue on the reed. It sounds like this. Feel free to join in. Let's try it together. 2, ready? Yeah. And when it becomes easy to do, it's half note alternations, we do quarter notes. So 1 beat off the reed, 1 beat on the reed. It sounds like. Then we go to 8th notes. And we keep getting faster. So the whole sequence will sound like. So we went from half note alternations all the way through sextuplets. And if we can do that successfully, we are essentially tonguing 16th notes at 120, which is a good place to be. That's always a target that I have for students. And when it's easy in the first register, we move up an octave. Because if it's easy on low C, it's easy on any note in the first register. So we move up an octave and we work all the way up to a thumb C. And this exercise is in some of the materials that I included in the folder of all of the materials that we compiled for today. So if you want to visit this, it's all there with lots of description, and it's all notated out, and you can work on it. So that's my tip-to-tip tonguing sermon. Okay, so I believe we're going to pass this on to Ricardo.
Yes. Hello, everybody. My name is Ricardo Freire, and I was away from Brazil. And I'm very glad to meet you because I have been to New Mexico. My son studied in Albuquerque at the University of New Mexico. So I know a little bit of the area there. And I teach at the university, but I work with very small kids, starting at 6 years old. And a good way to work with small kids is always to challenge them and bring their imagination and different ways to do things. And one resource that I use, it's a remedial embouchure. I play a lot with the reed up, because this way they cannot anchor tonguing, they cannot put the tongue below, they only can reach for the tip of the tongue. And as they are using double lip, they cannot bite when they are tonguing. So let's challenge and play a game with that. See, how do you do? Put your reed up. And this way we can follow what Professor Gardner was telling about tip to tip and interrupting sound and not stopping, because it's very hard to stop the sound when the reed is up. Let's try it. Let me listen to you playing with the reed up a little bit. Oh, I noticed that you were already finding when there is an overbite and the harmonic pops up, and when you need to just find the right amount of pressure. and how the reed should not, the tongue should not change the embouchure. So let's do a low note like a C, low G now. Now we can start to feel how this upper lip and tongue, they work together because they need to collaborate with each other. The upper tongue must hold and the tip must touch. But many times we don't feel how they interfere with each other. It needs to be really, really light tonguing and light pressure to have a good sound. Let's try one more time. And let's try to play it fast. Quarter note, 16 notes. Very good. Now let's put it back again to where it was. And let's play normally. Very good. So we can do some exploration and some challenge and find new ways to feel how it happens in our mouths and our tongues. And this is a historical embouchure. This playing with the reed up was the first embouchure that oboe players who play clarinet used to do this during the 18th century. In the 1700s, they used to play like that until 1850, more or less. The Paris Conservatory already had it moved down, but Ernesto Cavallini played with the reed up. And learning about him and how he had a very good staccato made me think to try this way in order to experience in our mouths a different feeling and finding how to place the tongue tip to tip. Thank you.
I think I'm next. I'm going to talk just a moment. We've talked about a lot of the mechanics of how to create an articulation. Something we also want to think about are an option of vowels or consonant sounds we can use. You've mentioned the E or an oo. And so what does the front of that sound like in various pieces we want to play? So I encourage my students to come up with a vocabulary of articulation. Many of us heard like a D or a T. To, some people use a thu or a thee, ni or nu, li, lu. So thinking about different ways we can articulate and create the fronts of those sounds that Corey talked about at the front of the talk, pending on what the composer has asked us to do. And so we can work on that variety of syllables to create different sounds and different fronts, depending on if we're playing fast passage work versus, and we're going to get into staccato here in a second. So I do want to pass it on to Corey. He was going to talk a little bit about the spectrum, I think it was, and then we'll go to Kylie.
Yeah, so I like to think about articulation as a spectrum. So essentially, I talk to my students a lot about a scale of 1 to 5. So on the side of 1, it's complete legato. On the scale of 5, it's a complete staccato. And ever since I drew it on the whiteboard in my office, students will play something and I'll ask them, what do you think, what would you put that as? 1, 2, 3, or 4, or 5? And it's very interesting because what I think is short, other people think is long, or vice versa. And so it kind of gets you all on the same page in terms of articulation length. And so often that when students are trying to play something, they're not playing something incredibly inaccurate. You just have to move it like to the left a little bit and just make it a little bit shorter. And really that just requires the tongue being on the reed a little bit longer. So that's my favorite thing to talk about when it comes to spectrum. But my little chunk of this was to talk about voicing and the other ideas that the tongue has to do besides articulation. So everyone's been saying E, and so I want everyone to say real quick, say E, and I want to tell me, can you feel the top back molars with the sides of your tongue when you say E? You can kind of feel those, right? So when you say E, the back of the tongue is nice and high. Now say shh, like a librarian. Shh. There we go. And so what that does is that keeps the tongue a little bit more forward. And so what you're doing is you're funneling that air towards the front of the mouth. And when you do that, you're essentially focusing. I remember as a young student, everyone would say spinning of the air, and they would do this. And I don't know what this means. As a young student, I had no idea what this means. And I had no idea what spinning meant. And someone said, make sure it's like a red thread. And I was like, I couldn't possibly understand what that means. I don't know how yarn has to do with clarinet pedagogy. And it was very confusing. But now that I'm older, I feel like it has to do with this idea of compressing the air between the roof of your mouth and the front of that tongue. So a great thing for you guys to do, I do this all the time when I'm in front of students, is to make sure that if your tongue is in the right spot overall, you have the student play a C. So this C right here. And then what you do is you can kind of come around, if you're the teacher, you can come around and you can just hit their register key and then the side G sharp key. And what that does, you get those. Could you guys hear those notes? Can we hear all three of those? Excellent. So if you can hear all three, then overall your tongue position is going to be more or less in the right spot. If you get a swing and a miss and you don't quite get that top note, it just means that front of the tongue is a little bit too low, and we're not gonna be able to be as successful on the clarinet in terms of those voicing ideas. You can do it yourself just by popping this and then hitting that G sharp key. Doing it on your own is completely fine. But I've noticed that it's really helpful as a teacher because you can go around to a bunch of clarinet players in a line, have them play a C and go bum, boom, bum, and just kind of bump those keys. And if they're not, then have them raise that front of the tongue a little bit more and use more fast, cold air. And that's really, really helpful. If voicing is a new concept to you and you've not really ventured into all the other things that the tongue can do besides articulation, something that I have students do is I have them cover their bell and finger a long B, clarion B. And if you hold the bell and you kind of seal it, not 100% seal, but like a little bit of a seal, you can get these various overtones. I'm going to try it right now. And you can kind of play taps. You can do taps all the way up and down. Now, is playing taps on the harmonics on the clarinet important? That's a hard no. So please don't think that this is important for you to do. But just the concept of getting used to the tongue and knowing that the tongue and angling the air in different locations, that there is a role. And for some of the altissimo notes, it makes it a lot easier. And getting that grunt out of that the left-hand clarion register, that G, A, and B, that can be very helpful as well by angling the air in certain areas. So the tongue has a lot of very important roles that we have. Articulation is one of them, but it also is used to produce a good tone and to tell the clarinet the same bits of information in terms of voicing. Excellent. I'm going to pass this over to Kylie. And also I'm going to say thank you all very much for having us. I do have to run to Dallas and play in a ballet, but I'm not dancing in a ballet, so it could be way uncomfortable. So thank you all so very much. I love New Mexico. I'm personally from West New Mexico, which is Arizona. So it's very far away. But I love the Southwest. So thank you guys so much and have a great rest of your celebration. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Kylie Stultz, and I am the clarinet professor at Purdue University, Fort Wayne in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And today I'm just going to briefly take you through one of my favorite exercises to work on staccato. I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully you all can see. Maybe you can just give me a thumbs up. Can you all see this and read it pretty well? Okay, wonderful. All right, so this is not my exercise, but it's Daniel Bonad's, who is a very famous clarinet player and pedagogue. He played in Philadelphia and Cleveland, and he has this great little book called the Clarinetist Compendium, and I use it all of the time with my students. Saxophonists, I think you can use it well, too, because Bonad actually taught his method of staccato to all types of instruments. So it's one that we can all benefit from. So basically what we're going to do, we've all talked about how the air is super important, and it's very, very important in staccato too. We're going to start our learning staccato by playing a long note and then just putting our tongue on the reed to stop the air stream from vibrating the reed, but the air still is going through your instrument. So I'm going to put my metronome on 60. I'll just kind of demonstrate. So just the top line. And all I do to create the start of the next note is I pull my tongue off the reed. So saxophones, is there a note? Open G is pretty nice for clarinet. What's an easy note you can all play? Maybe like a C or a C sharp or something. So could we all try this together? I'm gonna see if maybe Dr. Schuler, is my metronome, can they hear it?
Yep, we got it.
Would you count them off?
Yep. One.
All right.
1, 2, I'll count for you, and.
Good, yeah. So basically, there should be no movement in that rest. The only thing that moves is the tongue. To create the start of the next note is the tongue comes off the reed. Then you put it back on. Everything is still engaged. Embouchure is still engaged. Tongue or the airstream is still engaged. So then what we're going to do from the step 2 is to take that long note, and then we're going to turn them into short notes, because what creates a staccato note is the length of time your tongue spins off the reed. So if we want a short note, you have to take your tongue off and put it right back. So we'll try this one. I'll demonstrate, and then Dr. Schuler will take you through it. Sorry, Dr. Schuler, you didn't know you had to do this. All right. And then you can just repeat it. The goal is to have a nice crisp start and a nice crisp ending to the note, and that they all sound the same. You might find, so the reason I learned this exercise was when I was your age, I tongued on the roof of my mouth. And so this is what my teacher used to fix it. And it was really helpful, but at first I found it to be so frustrating because none of my notes sounded the same. So you want to keep working on it on a comfortable note that responds well on your instrument first, and really, once you get that sounding nice and clean, you can move to other notes, okay? So Dr. Schuler, will you count them off and take them through this?
Yep, you got it. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. So it's kind of tricky, right? So you want to make sure when you're at home and you're practicing this that you're not moving anything in the rest. It's just the tongue, so you shouldn't see anything move, and the airstream is engaged the entire time. From there, you can go up the scale, you can write different notes. And then, so does anyone have any questions about that? You good? Okay, cool. All right, so then the next thing you can do, this is one of my favorite exercises too. It's called slow synchro motion staccato. I know it's like really rolls off the tongue, but it's sometimes called prepared fingers. So what you can start to do is, once you get your short notes, this is kind of like an advanced taking it further. You would play a staccato C. You see I have a little scale here, and you're going to move your finger when your tongue is on the reed in the silence. So let me see if I can kind of get it lower. Okay. All right. So, oh no, you can't see my hand. There we go. Okay. So while my tongue was on the reed, did you all see my finger pop up to the next note? Okay, good. Then you would do. So you can practice that and then eventually speed it up. It takes some coordination at first, but this is something, if clarinet players, if you practice Mendelssohn Scherzo a lot, this one is great for working on that. Maybe we can try it. Let's try this. I'll just count you off, play a short note, and then immediately once you put your tongue on the reed, then move your finger to a step above it. Okay, can we try it? Here we go. 1, 2, ready, and play a short note. That's fine, yeah. Yeah, good. Just make sure, good. Excellent. Just make sure that you're not moving your notes at the same time that you're playing. I can't see your fingers from here, so you're going to have to monitor that yourselves. But it's a really, really great exercise. It cleans up lots of staccato. Like if you ever have tongue and finger coordination issues, like where it kind of like blip, 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 that sound, this really cleans it up. So I'm going to pass it over to Kip Franklin, who's going to talk to you a little bit more about staccato. I hope you find these helpful. I love these exercises and they're very simple. You don't even really need music.
All right, thank you very much. Hi, everyone. I'm Kip Franklin. I'm the Associate Professor of Clarinet at the University of South Alabama in Mobile. And I'm also the Treasurer for the International Clarinet Association. And my thought is generally just a summation or putting together of everything that everyone else has already spoken about, in that when I approach articulation, it is almost always usually the last skill I examine in a student's development. The most important is tone, then followed by technique, and then we integrate the articulation into it. If you're a music education hopeful, be aware of that, because I feel a lot of times that articulation gets introduced too early in the sequence, or at least in maybe nebulous ways. And then it ends up sort of mucking up all of the other things that we want to do. It gets in the way of our ability to play with clean technique or our ability to play with good tone. So you know, that's sort of my sequence, and my sort of you know, methods of choice for it are the Galper, tone, technique, and staccato. I have a feeling he put those concepts in that order for a reason. And also the old Bill Stubbins book, The Essentials of Clarinet Dexterity, is one that I sort of live and breathe by with that. But I think that we need to also understand that the concept of articulation is, as many people have said, I quantify it a bit. Articulation is 85% what you do with your air and only 15% what you do with your tongue. And so many of my students have that concept reverse, because whether you play saxophone, clarinet, brass, probably, the overarching criticism is that everyone tongues too hard. Everybody puts too much effort into the tongue muscle to articulate. And so what I want to sort of remind you of in the sense of staccato playing is that shorter notes do not equal harder tongue. You know, I always sort of go like this a little bit and like that a little bit whenever students say that staccato means short, because that's not always the case. It depends on who writes it, in what piece they write it, at what speed they write it. Staccato principally just means detached. And we need to keep that definition in mind, because if we play detached, we're more inclined to tongue with a light articulation syllable versus a heavy one. Dr. Kirk Doyle mentioned a bunch of syllables at the beginning. My syllable of choice, almost across the board, unless I'm doing some 20th century piece that's demanding of extended techniques, but if I'm just sort of just doing traditional, you know, Mozart, Brahms, clarinet playing, I like ni. And the reason is because the E vowel reinforces what Dr. Mackey was talking about how we can preserve voicing, our tone, while we're articulating. The N consonant sound at the beginning is one for me that I consider to be the lightest one. It's the least percussive on the reed. If you are told to tongue like ta is the worst, because ta is incredibly percussive. The tongue abuses the reed by going all the time. And also the ah lowers the tongue in your mouth. So you end up playing the clarinet like this, with the tongue sitting like a cup in your mouth. If you're articulating with ta all the time. So for me, it's all about ni. D is also a convenient alternative. I like to avoid the T-based syllables, again, just because I don't like to think of being overly percussive on the reed. But the last thing I'll mention is, okay, so this idea about staccato does not mean short, it just means detached. And I'm confident that at some point, somebody has told you to practice slowly, to practice something slowly. And if that something happens to be, maybe a technical passage that involves an articulation or a staccato articulated passage, the connection that I want to make that kind of brings it all together for me is when we play slower, our notes arguably should be a bit longer. And it's strange for students to think about staccato being long. But in practicing that slowly, what we're developing is the detached or the light tongue stroke. And then when we start to play the music faster or closer to tempo, what happens to the note lengths naturally as a consequence of going faster? Yeah, they get shorter anyway, right? So the shortness that, the staccato passage might be trying to convey could be conveyed with the tempo and not by the force of the tongue. Okay, so short playing or detached playing doesn't equal forceful tongue playing. That's where the ni or the D syllable comes in. And again, it's 85% about the air. What Dr. Garner was mentioning at the beginning about, the exercise where you put your tongue on the reed, but not enough to really completely block off the reed. All he has to do is apply like the teensiest little bit more pressure and the sound stops. So it's more like that grazing the reed and less, again, like the percussiveness on the reed. That's my piece. Thank you all.
Are we good to wrap up at this point?
I think so. It seems like it's a good stopping place. And is this when you need to move on?
Does anybody have any, we don't have much time, but does anybody have any questions on anything that you have heard today? This is the first time I've heard them without questions. Usually they have tons of questions. So we must have done a good job then. Can we thank all of our guest presenters?